I want to be taller than Richard. Yeah.
This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining us today. With me is Richard Fields and John Cameron. And gentlemen, we're going to jump right in. A new Illinois law will now allow students to take 5 mental health days starting in 2022. Oh, by the benevolence of the crown, our students and parents can now take care of their mental health as they see fit, but only for 5 days. Don't let it interfere with their blessed schedule and their blessed funding, because we know they get funded by how many days you're in school. So God forbid you be out and miss a day of funding because, you want to take care of your mental health. It goes to show the complete backwardsness of our relationship between school and parents and students. And they sit there, they can allow you now to have 5 mental health days. It's absurd from the very concept.
Well, I mean, it goes to mandatory attendance at a public school, or if by the mercy of the crown, you're allowed to go to private school or homeschool. And that's very iffy, whether you'll be allowed to do that. It depends upon your family's wealth, if it's private school, and upon some judgment from some bureaucrat somewhere, if parents are going to be allowed to be homeschooled. It's the whole idea that goes back to the German Bismarck education system, which was mandatory education to train everybody to be a good factory worker and a obedient citizen. We have an education system in this country, LHI at least, which is designed for the 18th or 19th century and is totally inadequate and totally backwards for the 21st century, whatever century we're in.
Whatever century we happen to be in now. Yeah.
I want to say I concur with the whole, and every time we talk about government schools, I got to make sure I have this quote in front of me. Isabel Peterson: "There can be no greater stretch of arbitrary power than is required to seize children from their parents, teach them whatever the authorities decree they shall be taught, and expropriate from the parents the funds to pay for the procedure." And I think a little bit later in the show, we're going to talk about the great teaching of a local Sacramento area teacher and the response to his teaching. But anyway, it's mental health, and they're talking about, kids are under a lot of stress because of COVID. No, they're not under a lot of stress because of COVID. They're under a lot of stress because of the overlords' methods to keep the serfs in place, which is the only possible reason for masking kids and putting them in school. These are kids who are too young to know germ theory. They think they're going to die. They can't read facial expressions. They're isolated from their peers. No wonder they're stressed. And even if they weren't, what's the government doing telling people they can't take them out of a place where they are brainwashed and taught no useful life skills and take care of their mental health?
Well, as someone who had an undiagnosed anxiety disorder all the way through school, you can actually excuse the 70s and 80s when we didn't know these things. But we now know these things, that anxiety disorder affects 19%, 20% of the population. And that we now know that early education produces long-term psychological harm. And we now know these things, but yet what do we get from it? Oh, we'll allow you to take 5 mental health days. I managed to graduate high school on time with a 50% attendance rate. Wasn't, how much, maybe I could have learned more if I had spent more time in school, except what I was learning in school was that I hated the place. And so if we don't fundamentally change the environment of our education system, we're going to continue to have this problem. But as long as our politicians and the unions that protect them are the ones in control, we're going to get these things like this where they allow us to take 5 mental health days, pat themselves on the back for being generous, and and students and parents are sitting there left in the lurch, holding the bag. And as you said, this backlash over what you call the AntiFa teacher, but really it's a Marxist indoctrination in your school. He literally admitted it on camera. And what? And parents can go to their school board, they can yell and complain, but the school board wasn't even listening. They were sitting there on their phones, checking the internet. It was kind of the complete lack of connection between parents, students, and the school boards and those people who run our school system is just on full display these days. And it's almost disheartening. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Are we talking about or do we blend this into the AntiFa?
Yes, I did, John.
Why not?
So yeah, a friend of Richard and I worked with a young woman who sent me the video, and I think did I forward it to you, Richard? I forwarded the video to you. I meant to. That was taken by Project Veritas, and I'm sure it was cut and pasted, and I don't think the guy knew he was being recorded, but he has a Antifa flag in his classroom. He put stamps on people's papers for like good jobs at Mao Zedong and Stalin and all these people. He said on camera he had 180 days to turn these kids into revolutionaries, and if people don't like it, then they should give up their outmoded thinking and get on board, and blah, 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 blah. Expletive-laced conversation with what he thought were like-minded parents. Now, many things stand out to me. One, 180 days. So what are we paying these guys this amount of money for if they're only teaching 180 days? Although, maybe, with the job they're doing, brainwashing kids into serfs who can't get a job when they get out, maybe we should cut their teaching time down to 1 day. And just pay them not to do the damage they're doing. But it was pretty bad. And then the school district, the principal said, I'm not aware of the stuff that being in the classroom before this, I have no recollection of. Good and well, somewhere later in their little statement they put out, they said, we apologize for anyone who's been made uncomfortable over the last 3 years. So apparently this guy was doing this stuff, Marxist indoctrination, giving people extra credit, students. This is an AP class, advanced placement, which is supposed to ready you for college, for doing research into Leninism and Marxism and all the rest of that.
Well,
to be fair, that's exactly what you need to succeed in college if you're pursuing a liberal arts degree anymore.
Oh yeah,
you need to be totally woke, and they're going to be, well prepared for that.
Well,
which of course leads to the question of what's a liberal arts degree worth anymore, which is basically it's a negative worth.
Yeah. So if I am woke, I'll get a job and be broke, unless you get into politics. And what is this woke stuff? If Ayn Rand were alive today, this would kill her. It's just everything she predicted and more and at least in the past, the socialists had the common sense to hide their socialism behind environmentalism. Now they've just gone ahead and said, we're socialists. So what we want you, America, to do, where up until, government became oppressive, best standard of living, best healthcare, best roads, best educational system, best in the world. Once we started taking socialism and shoving it into, government bodies, everything has gone downhill since then. We want you to take the example of Venezuela, that shining light, in Cuba and Nazi Germany and the Soviet Empire and China and all these other murderous regimes. And we want this here because it's worked so well other places. Let's go ahead and brainwash the kids.
Which brings me to the philosophical realization, which is something that I've kind of come up with in the last few weeks, which is this: when a government is oppressive, it's really the people in the government who are being repressive or oppressive, and certainly we see examples of oppression from Marxists when they control governments. We see examples of oppression from right-wingers, when they control governments, think Pinochet in Chile, think, although I hate to use the example of Hitler and Mussolini because they were also socialists and not really right-wingers, but right-wingers anywhere are also oppressive. Mm-hmm. And when we look at trying to throw off oppressive rulers, we often say, okay, we need to get those oppressors out of there and bring in our own oppressors that will enforce our point of view rather than the people we don't like's point of view. The real goal should be to get rid of the power that government gives to oppressors. Without power, the oppressors have no leverage. They're footnotes in history. They're a laughingstock. Give them power, and they have the ability to destroy civilizations, which is happening as we watch.
Yeah, there's an old saying, and I forget who said it, but a crazy king with no power is just a crazy king. But a crazy king who has actual authority is very dangerous. And so that's kind of the difference. We have a bunch of crazy people running for office, a bunch of narcissists, but the problem is they have actual power. If they're just up there blowhards, being a bunch of blowhards, it's fine. Who cares? But they have actual impact in our daily lives. And it's this, I don't know. I don't even know what to think about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on. You reach a point where you just get so frustrated. Yeah.
Closing statement, if I can, on this. Whenever I have discussions with people about government and power, I ask them how many gas chambers Target has run or Apple has run. How many invasions of foreign countries has even Microsoft, that I despise, done. Individual people are good. People who assume positions of government power immediately turn into, basically, if you strive to have a position that has that kind of power, you are by definition, in almost all cases, a sociopath. There are some shining lights we have a couple of great libertarian candidates running for governor who are there to dismantle government and throw off the yoke. But there's a T-shirt, and I can't mention the brand name because I can't remember it. If I did, I probably would. And it says, they can't arrest us all. The only way to throw off the yoke of these people is simply for everyone to refuse to do what they say they have the power to make us do, because they only have the amount of power that we give them. And if everyone refuses to do these stupid things, all they can do is sit in their little rooms and cry.
Yeah, that's a good way to end that and to move on. Our U.S. generals, as they move to the private sector, get to go to corporate boards, consulting fees, speakers. They get to go to all these businesses and get huge fees for speaking. So how independent our generals actually are?
Well, let's just put some numbers on it. There were 8 generals that served during our 20-year war in Afghanistan. Those 8 generals have managed to get on 20 corporate boards, all very well paying. David Petraeus, the guy who pled guilty to providing classified materials to his mistress while he was general, is a partner with KKR, one of I think the largest private equity firm in the country. Stanley McChrystal, he got $1.3 million for being on the board of JetBlue, a similar number for being on the board of Navistar. Navistar is the company which paid a $50 million fine to get out from under the charge of defrauding the Marines of $50 million in overcharges for armored vehicles in Iraq and Afghanistan. What we have here, what?
1.5 billion. The fine was 50 million. The overcharge was 1.5 billion.
Yeah, exactly. What we have here is a very clear revolving door between the military generals and the defense companies that make huge amounts of money supplying the generals with the tools of war. The same thing can be said for the education complex, where we have a revolving door between the Department of Education at the federal and at the state levels, and the textbook suppliers and the other kinds of the other businesses that are involved in making education so-called supposedly possible. We have the same thing in the healthcare field, where we have quasi-monopolies granted by the government to hospitals and other and doctors and other medical care practitioners, and they move it back and forth between FDA and between the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and so on, the CDC, move back and forth between positions of power in the government and running large pharmaceutical companies and other perquisites of having been in power and having contacts. The problem is that we give way too much money and way too much power to government. We need to stop doing that. Is my optimism about that happening high? Well, not right now, but eventually we run out of other people's and printed money, at which point the whole thing comes to an inglorious end. What follows is anybody's guess.
I want to add to what Richard said. I absolutely agree. I'm a veteran and went to Ranger School, dropped out. I was just tired and too small because I didn't have the 20 pounds to lose that most people lose, between 20 and 30 pounds in Ranger School. I would have weighed like a negative number. Not really, but I would ended up weighing less than 100 pounds. So at Ranger School, they used to have this thing called peer rating. And West Point officers go, a lot of them go to Ranger School. And so they get in and rate themselves at the top, 1 through whatever, 100 West Point officers, and then senior enlisted folks and non-West Point officers, and then enlisted people where I was. And it used to be that if you were in the bottom of the peer rankings, you were called from the school. Example number 2, that's a West Point Protective Association, the WPPA. It's very well known. And it happens, my father was a World War II vet, and he tried to give a bad OER to a West Point graduate, which is an officer efficiency rating. I think that's what they called it then. And he was riffed soon after, which is they found out they had too many officers of his rank, so they made him a sergeant. So this has been part of the U.S. military. I'm not saying that that some of the military schools don't graduate good people, but the idea that in that hugely structured hierarchical environment, you can take skills and transfer them to an entrepreneurial world is flat out wrong. The only reason you hire those people and have them on the board and on the staff and all the rest of that is it so that you can worm your way into defense contracts, as Richard said. You show me a West Point general that could figure out how to market a product, and I was going to say I would shoot myself, but there might be a unicorn out there somewhere. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. It's like asking somebody from state government who's risen through the ranks of backstabbing and politics in state government to come out and give advice to somebody who has to survive in a competitive environment. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, this notion that a general who's worked in the military their whole life can go into a corporate board and actually give them some actual advice on how to function in the real world is as John said, it's ludicrous. But they can actually help them navigate the bureaucracy, and that's exactly what they're there for.
What they do.
That's exactly what they're there for.
Favors. They know who to bribe. Well, I don't want to say that because that might be actionable. They
know whose campaign to contribute to.
Yeah.
They know who they have the Rolodex, and they know who's more friendly to conversations is a good way to start it. But actually we're talking about corruption in government. More businesses have fled California this year than they did all of 2020. Businesses or headquarters, they're fleeing the state, as well as their people.
And I think the numbers show that it's mostly small businesses. Small businesses, of course, are the hugest or the largest job creators and have been forever. small business creates a heck of a lot more more jobs and more economic vitality than large established businesses do, because they're risk takers, where large businesses are risk avoiders. So we are destroying the lifeblood of business, which is the lifeblood of the economy of California, by overregulation in the areas of safety and in the areas of environmentalism and a host of other areas.
Absolutely. And one of the major areas is, I don't know if farming is still the number one economic engine in the state of California. Maybe it's two behind tech now, but it's huge. The two biggest farming areas in the world are in the state of California, and they rely on something called water. As my English relatives would tell me to say it, or if you're from London, the mismanagement of an abundant natural resource called water in the state of California, and the misdirection of that resource away from a great creator of jobs and capital, which is the agricultural industries and the logging industries, which they've already destroyed in California, and directing it to the care of a fish which probably isn't even native. It's frightening. The problem is that the people in government firmly believe that wealth isn't created. It's expropriated, it's taxed, it's printed. But they don't understand that wealth, real wealth that lasts generations, wealth that creates jobs, is created. And they were never taught this concept, because none of the schools they ever attended ever taught it. They weren't taught it in high school, they weren't taught it in college. And if there was a course they could take that taught it, they chose not to. And they will pay the piper. The one part of science they refuse to acknowledge is the historical science, that no fiat currency has survived forever. But
for even more than a few generations, which is what we're seeing with the world's exchange, the dollar.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not just economics. We're actually ripping apart our culture and societal fabric. These are our societies. People are being ripped out of our communities. These are people who help little league teams and all these various community organizations. They've now been ripped out and moved off to somebody else to help another community, while the hearts of our communities are being stolen from us because politicians have a narrow focus, shall we say. I'm trying to be polite and nice today. I'm trying to have a positive attitude, and our topics are not helping. Because our next one is,
who picked those topics, James?
I'm trying to do my job. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna hit the next one, and it's even worse. We got a few minutes left. This new Texan abortion law has everybody up in arms, and from a libertarian perspective, we're like, if you all would just believe what you actually say, these solutions are easy. Mind your own business. These are difficult personal decisions, but now we have politicians and activists getting themselves more and more involved in our healthcare decisions. Whether it's abortions or vaccinations, it's the same thing. Get the heck out of our bodies. Get the government and society out of our bodies. They have no place there. Do you guys have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that you can prevent something that people want to do by government edict has been false and always will be false. Drug abuse got worse when it was made more criminalized by the Nixon administration and administrations before it. Prostitution is the oldest industry in the world. It's never gone away, despite however strict the prohibitions against it in any culture, anywhere. And the same thing is true with the topic at hand.
Absolutely. There are people who fervently believe that a fetus is a human life and is sacred, and the motivation to doing trying to trying to create these laws, some of these people, I'm not saying all of them, is basically to prevent what they consider murder. And their motivations might be pure and clean, but you know, if it wasn't for the abortion subject, the regressives, as I like to call people who are labeled by others as progressives, would never win an election, not a national election. But because the conservatives slash libertarians, some libertarians, conservative leaning libertarians, line up on the wrong side of it, they automatically lose majority of the women's vote in this country. And there are ways. You know, the Supreme Court, I think their decision was based upon the fact that legally Roe versus Wade was a very crap legal decision. And you know what they're saying quite simply is, okay, Congress, if you want something that'll hold up to legal standard, go ahead and write a law. Go ahead and get together as you know, the Senate and Congress, and codify people's rights to at a national level, something that's part of our Constitution, to have an abortion. You know, that so the solution to the problems and the fights about Roe v. Wade and all the rest of that is very simple. Well, if government does anything, it's not very simple. And there are also, you know, one of the benefits of the federal system is that you know, if you don't like the abortion law in Texas, then Mexico's right across the border. There are other states where you can go. So I'm not saying that the decision was a good one, but I'm saying that there are workarounds. There are abortion pills, there are abortion treatments. The go-to for movie stars, you know, years and years ago was simply a huge penicillin injection into one buttock to cause a miscarriage. So it's government trying to control what other people want to do will always fail. And you know, thank goodness there's not enough people in government to actually point a gun at every single one of us every day to make these things stick.
Yeah, there's competing moralities. Two things can actually be true at one time. You know, you can actually have the right to be secure in your own person, and you know, abortion can be viewed as morally wrong, and those two things can actually be true. And when those two things intersect, we have a difficult conversation. But we can't have difficult conversations if we're yelling at each other and accusing each other of being bad human beings. There are honorable people trying to do honorable things, but you have to remind yourselves that the path to hell is paved with good intentions. And so as much as they may want to have good intentions on wanting to save the lives of unborn fetuses, those good intentions come with a cost, and those costs must be weighed. And we must weigh that we are out of time. We want to thank you guys for joining us. We want to thank Richard and John for being here with me. You can find us on all the various social media, and from those of us on here at Libertarian Counterpoint.
And thank you for having